What is happening out there, Roto Scouts football fans? Good to see you, gang. Thursday night. Welcome back. A little bit of a late start. Not sure what kind of a turnout we're going to get for this one. Probably a little light. I think all the big shows are kicking off in the next couple of minutes, but I get it. Lot to do, lot to cover. 13-game main slate coming up this weekend. Taking a lot of the time the last 2 days to get that thing in order. Really good-looking football game tonight, though, between the Dolphins and the Bills. My brain really wanted to call them the Marlins in that moment, and I knew that wasn't right, and I just stopped speaking because I could not conjure the correct word when I wanted to say Dolphins. I almost said the Miami Marlins. The Dolphins are in Buffalo for a good one. I say good one. The Bills are favored by 11.5, but it's a 50-point game. Good one for our purposes. Should be a fun one. Gambling and player props and DFS and whatnot. What the quality of the actual football game looks like, we'll see. Dolphins pretty bad defensively, at least against the pass. I actually just corrected the rankings on this tab. I think they were correct on the other one, not on this one, for the defenses. What's going on beyond the rabbit hole? Good to see you too, buddy. And 4 yards per rush attempt allowed by the Miami defense so far ranks them in the middle of the league, 13th, not completely terrible, around the average. 9.1 yards per pass attempt allowed so far, 30th ranked. Ouch. 17.5% pressure rate, pretty weak. 4 sacks on the board over 2 games, pretty weak. Just going to be one of those spots, it feels like, where we're just going against this team with whoever. And we get one of the upper echelon offenses in football to work with today. As we talked about the other day with this Bills team, I do think that they lack that, outside of the quarterback position, obviously, and arguably the running back. I think they lack that true top shelf superstar skill player. Kind of the same thing that the Chiefs have run into with no Tyreek Hill. They're very, very good at what they do, and they don't need it to win football games. But it does impact sometimes where they land on like main slates as far as like where they're ranked offensively versus some of the other teams. But I think when it comes down to it, and especially on showdown slates, this is a team I love getting to for DFS. You obviously get major upside out of the quarterback, but I like the depth of the wide receiving core. For showdown, I love that they have the second capable tight end in Dawson Knox, who comes up at a nice cheap price tonight. I think they've got a lot of usable pieces. They've got a kicker that I really like in Matt Prater, who I think is going to be a little bit popular with all the potential scoring he's going to do today. So it's just a good Buffalo team to work with. And then the team on the other side, bet as they are defensively, bet as they might have looked in that first game, much more capable, at least for DFS scoring in the second game. Tua threw for over 300 yards. We had Tyreek Hill go over 100 yards. We're dealing with a banged-up Jalen Waddle coming into tonight. He's dealing with a shoulder injury. He's allegedly going to test it out pregame and decide whether he's going to play, but it seems like he's almost definitely going to play. If you see him not play, obviously there's a downstream impact there. To me, if he doesn't go, you pick up the Westbrook-Ikhine, Malik Washington pairing there a little bit. But to me, that would just feed extreme volume in the direction of Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane. Last time out, they didn't target the tight end position at all. They've got Tanner Connor and Julian Hill, the two backups, kind of splitting that role right now. And just basically dead on snaps are over here. Basically dead on snap count split over the first 2 games. And just didn't go to that position at all last time out. Might do the same thing again. So kind of low-end options at the position there. And then you get just kind of squeezed by the mediocrity on some of those options with the depth of the wide receiver position on this team. And it's kind of the same deal at the running back position outside of, Ollie Gordon, who hasn't really seen that much. 12% of the snaps last week, 18% of the snaps overall over 2 games. So I think it just really, really would feed Tyreek Hill and Achane up top of the board. And then, yeah, like I said, to some degree, probably either Malik Washington or Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but not both. But showdown format, we're obviously playing all of those guys. A lot of wild card potential down the depth chart with the Dolphins. And this monster total, assuming they at least hold up through the first half, we should see some scoring. And then whatever we get out of the third quarter, and then maybe Buffalo's running away with it in the fourth quarter. But there's a chance Miami hangs. They can put up points. Buffalo's defense can definitely get got. Over the first two games, they've given up 6.8 yards per rush attempt, which should not be ignored. Ranks at the bottom of the league, and they've got an elite running back going against them with ridiculous explosive ability. So a little back and forth there. I think between the kickers and defense, you get a kicker out of either team for sure. We prefer Prater. He projects out a little bit higher. Defense, I think we probably lean more toward Buffalo, even though I don't love the idea of either defense. Bills are a little bit pricey on that FanDuel slate as well. 7,400 in the util spot, 11-1 in the captain. Here's a team that, again, can do some scoring. They generated a 22% pressure rate so far. They rank out well against the pass, but it's only middle of the league. 6 sacks on the board so far. They're all right. And again, they would be the preferred defense, but if we're just looking for this game to do a little bit of scoring, I think we play around that and put the kickers into play a little bit more. When we get to the lineup building, which we'll jump to in a minute, I did go in and at least try to tweak some of the ownership. I was looking at it the other day the last time we talked and built lineups and everything, and it's just coming away as I talk about when we've been building those lineups. But those ownership projections that we use are just, they're off by a little bit. That has such an impact that I tried to get it to stack up a little bit more up at the top. So I just went into the top 5-6 guys and added about 10 points of ownership projection artificially to each of them to see if we can get a little bit more of a challenge into those lineup builds. We'll see what kind of impact it has once we get there. Maybe I won't be able to put anything good together, but I had some of the ones that we've built on the show where we're coming away with, all right, that one says it'll be duped mathematically, twice. Maybe we'll expect, 8 to 10 and it becomes, 25. And it's just, all right, that was too far off. I felt like also we weren't getting enough of the kickers worked into our conversations there. A little bit same thing with the defenses. So maybe that'll feed that part of the conversation a little bit more. So we'll get into that stuff in a minute. But as you can see, lurking there in the middle of the board in dark green, monster projection on both sides out of Josh Allen, I think deservedly so. We have seen two different versions of the Bills offense. He threw a ton of passes week 1, less so week 2, and vice versa with just how many touches James Cook got on the ground. Week 1, in that shootout with Baltimore, Allen threw the ball 46 times for 394 yards. Last week, they reined it in 25 pass attempts. A lot more limited. The truth probably lands in that low 30s type range. James Cook went from 13 rush attempts for 44 yards and did score a touchdown. He also caught 5 passes, dual threat role, to 21 carries for 132 yards in the second game. They're very, very capable in both modes of attack, but I do think we lean a little bit more into the pass given the ridiculous success that we've seen over 2 weeks against this Miami defense and against the pass. Little wrinkle defensively that I read in somebody's notes. Both these teams do play a fair amount, top 10 in too high coverage, and that has a slight impact historically on targeting for Tyreek Hill. Slight uptick in targeting for Jalen Waddle, assuming he's out there. Slight downtick for Tyreek Hill. And then on the other side, Keon Coleman tends to struggle against it and would expect a slight downtick in targeting for him with an uptick for Khalil Shakir. We'll get to those guys in a minute. Prefer Shakir in general between those two guys anyway, but we'll get through that offense in a minute. But just again, that monster projection for Josh Allen does really stand out and draw the eye, especially on a showdown slate. He's going to be ludicrously popular. He was 3 times more popular in the captain role than anybody else in the FanDuel projections. It's similar on DraftKings. So a lot of people are just riding with that because of his crazy, crazy scoring upside. And he does have easily the best unique individual scoring upside on the slate. It's just, what does that impact of A, the popularity, B, the cost have on what you can do with those lineups, how much you're going to be duped if you happen to win. And if you're just chopping it, 1,000 ways or 200 ways, as we've said, it's nice. It's still nice to chop 100,000 or 250,000 or whatever the DraftKings prize is tonight, 4 ways, 5 ways. But once we start piling that up and it's like, all right, great, I made $16 for winning that showdown slate, it does become a lot less appealing and not really what we're shooting for here. So there's a lot of complex math going on in the Josh Allen play in the captain role. You absolutely want him through the flex spot for sure in at least a high volume of your lineups. But there's a good argument to be made that we benefit greatly from just going with one of the very good skill players that we've got, get the quarterbacks into the flex spots like we typically do. You could even argue, given that at least like half of Tua's typical ownership would be, the second best quarterback in a showdown slate, half of that basically is going to Josh Allen. So I think there's an argument to be made for Tua in the captain spot a little bit more so than Allen. So again, elite potential production out of that spot, a very likely path toward hitting the top score, but it's also a very, very likely path toward hitting that top score with a whole bunch of friends along for the ride. So it depends on what you're looking for. There was just a car crash outside or somebody got shot. I assume it wasn't a gunshot. Not that bad a neighborhood anymore. Once upon a time, apparently. But anyway, between the two quarterbacks, there's a pretty stark difference. Nearly a 10-point projection. Obviously, that's a monster for Josh Allen, but everything about this defense should feed a big, big game for the Bills offense. He could score on the ground, could score through the air, averages out over the 2 starts to 35 pass attempts a game, 271 yards a game. Obviously, those numbers are a little bit in small sample. 7.6 yards per pass attempt, pretty realistic, though. He's carried the ball 10 times a game for 4.5 yards per rush attempt so far. He's already run in 2 touchdowns. Just elite scoring ability among quarterbacks. Tua, for his part, threw the ball a lot more in their second game. First game, only 23 pass attempts and was just awful. 114 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. Turned that around completely the second time out. Threw for 315 yards on 32 attempts. So the volume was there. It was nice to see. Much more competitive performance that game. Again, he got Tyreek Hill over 100 yards. Threw 2 touchdowns, 1 interception in that game. 8.8 yards per pass attempt to push him up to a 7.8 yards per attempt average. On the season, we're dealing with 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions across the 2 performances. Obviously, doesn't look good outside of the completion percentage. You get a little bit more dink and dunk high accuracy type passes on a lot from Tua. But he can get the ball down the field, at least as needed. We've seen a 16-yard average depth of target for Tyreek, 10.8 for Jalen Waddle. The other guy's operating a little bit more underneath. But there's enough depth. There's obviously big playability in both of Tyreek and Waddle. Tyreek especially, can just explode and take one anywhere. HN at the top, good argument to be made for him in the captain spot as well, especially, again, if Josh Allen's going to soak up that much of the captain ownership. It does loosen up a little bit around a guy like him, but he's such a draw in that spot that it does have kind of the same thing as Allen on the other side. He's also the most expensive Dolphin. So it's not like you're getting a price break there with him. You're kind of eating salary where you would get that price break a little bit on Tua, and you are getting a little bit of an ownership break for the quarterback position from that team. It's just that is also their most highly projected player, and it's more stark on DraftKings given his involvement in the pass game where you get the PPR scoring. So something to consider between those two. If you're looking at just the raw scoring potential, who do you go to out of Tua or HN from the Dolphin side of things? If you're just drawing your captain out of those top 2, I would probably lean Tua Where in a normal situation, I'd be probably leaning toward the skill player. The rest of that argument, though, is probably, at least to me, that either of Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle would be a better option in the skill role, or in the captain role, rather, the MVP role. Just because, again, you get further afield with the ownership. You're still buying into the explosive upside. You're still putting the quarterback in the flex role in that scenario. So you're getting the player correlation. You're getting the stack. You're getting the salary discount on your multiplier. So you can buy other things in those flex roles. And you're just cutting down that dupe potential. It's really all about just trying to thread that needle. Between the two, a healthy Tyreek is definitely tempting. Waddle with the shoulder injury, even if he's out there, and it's easier to get him out there since it's not a leg issue, but limited ability to raise your arm might have a bit of an impact given the shoulder. So something to watch there. But if he's out there, if he's healthy enough, my typical approach is if they're healthy enough to be out there, we're certainly happy to put them in our lineup. If it takes away ownership publicly, fantastic. If it takes away coverage or expectation from the other team, fantastic. Works to his benefit. So as long as he's out there, absolutely like the play. He was interesting last week. He caught 5 balls, 68 yards and a touchdown. That was following up only 4 catches for 30 yards in the first week. And in the first week, he only ran 21 routes. Again, they were just so limited in that game against Indy that just nothing got going. He ran 21 routes. He drew 5 targets. Last week, he ran 32 routes and caught 5 of 6 targets. At the same time, Hill ran 22 routes the first week. He was targeted just 6 times, caught 4 of them for 40 yards. Last time out, he ran 30 routes, was targeted 7 times, caught 6 of those for 109 yards. So they're both out there. You're getting a similar route run, similar target sharing. But the favoritism goes toward Tyreek Hill, the bigger of the 2 stars and the bigger of our 2 projected players. Overall, 6.5 targets to 5.5 targets for the season. Tyreek giving you much more production in the 2-game sample with 11.5 yards per target. But, Waddle no slouch at 8.9. Waddle's got the touchdown between the 2. They both have decent depth of target, but given the slight difference in volume and the deeper targeting, we do have a 38.57% air yard share going in Tyreek Hill's favor so far. And then you get a little pickup on Malik Washington for a little bit of air yards as well. 3.5 targets a game on a 7.1 yard average depth of target, pushing him up to 22.8%. That doesn't really align if you do the math, though. That's weird. These 2 numbers come from different sources. I'm just wondering if 3.5 targets over 7.1 should not equal more. 5.5 on a 10.8, I wouldn't think, unless I'm thinking about that wrong. Anyway, we won't worry about that right now. Let's see if I have that number elsewhere. So the one problem with drawing from different sources, every now and then you get little conflicting pieces of information like that. Just want to see. Is it in here at all? Yeah, that number's funky. I wonder what that's drawing against. All right, we're going to ignore that air yard share column for a minute. It's that percentage that's funky. Hang with me one sec. Yeah, no, not Malik Neighbors. If I had Malik Neighbors, that would be much better offense.
That's really bugging me. I hate when I kick over stuff like this during a show. I can check that spot too. Which one of these is correct? Cool. This is giving me a third number. All right. I'm going to move on from what's going on with Malik Washington's depth numbers there. But now I'm wondering, like, where's Tyreek Hill? Just real quick. So what happens when I pull the dashboard together right before the show? Fortunately, this is a completely different file than the actual model, which doesn't have this problem. $16.4, 16.0 is basically a wash. So 13 total targets. 6.5 average. Yeah, so Tyreek Hill is right. That's weird. The Malik Washington number is different. Well, anyway, moving on from that complete delay. Washington ran 26 routes in week 1, 21 in week 2. Limited targeting. Was targeted 5 times the first week, but just twice last week. He did carry the ball a few times. Maybe a little something interesting there. But more of a dart throw behind just the ridiculous volume that goes here and then to these two. HN involved in the passing game like crazy. That's, again, why we love the PPR scoring that he provides. Caught 3 passes in the first game on 4 targets over 22 routes. Second game, caught 8 balls on 10 targets, ran 35 routes out of the backfield. Just a tremendous bump to his potential touches any given week. Over the first couple games, just 9 carries a game, 4.7 yards per attempt. 2.4 before, 2.3 after, essentially even. But obviously we know what his explosiveness looks like. So far we're dealing with essentially 16 potential touches in those 2 games. But again, that first game, very limited. He carried the ball 11 times in the second game. So between that and the 10 targets, we're talking about 21 potential touches. Our magic number is typically around 20. I think expectation should probably be in the 18 to 20 range generally. But there's plenty of involvement for HN at the top. It's just about how that price and popularity bump off the multiplier. Again, Patterson should be involved enough from the kicking side and would probably be your lower owned, more reasonably priced kicker to slot in. And there's plenty of paths to see him get on the board. If Miami's not having a good day, he's kicking. If Miami is doing scoring, he's kicking. So I think that he's a reasonable option, more so than the Dolphins D. We get down to Ollie Gordon. Played 12 snaps in the first game, just 6 last week. Carried the ball twice in the first game, just once last time out. Ran a few routes in each game, 9 in the first game, 2 in the second game, but drew just 1 target in each. Caught each target, but didn't exactly add up. Jalen Waddle healthy, by the way. Didn't exactly add up to a ton of production. 1.5 attempts a game. Did gain 4 yards per attempt, but there's no volume there. Again, Connor and Julian Hill seem like a kind of a lost cause at the tight end position right now. Connor in the first game was targeted 4 times over 19 routes. Caught 2 of them for 20 yards. Second game ran 19 routes, went untargeted. Julian Hill ran 7 routes, went untargeted. He ran 10 routes in the first game. So between the two, you get a little bit more potential scoring out of Tanner Conner, but if they're not going to throw the ball to either guy, who cares? Jalen Wright, due back. Missed the first two. See a couple potential touches, but behind all the volume, there really aren't that many touches. What maybe he does is erase out anything that would have gone Ollie Gordon's direction. And then you do have a slight wild card in the fact that Alec Ingle get out there and run a couple routes. Was targeted twice over 11 routes in the second game. Once over 5 routes in the first game. That's over 13 snaps and 19 snaps. So that is just a dirt cheap, total wild card value type guy. Again, there's a nothing projection there. It would be entirely touchdown dependent for him to find any kind of value. None of his opportunities so far have come in the red zone. So extreme limitation on what that actually looks like. Mentioned the major upside. Obviously, this Miami defense has just gotten torched by the pass. Josh Allen so far, 35 attempts a game, thrown for 271 yards a game, 7.6 yards per attempt. Covered that already. Talked about his rushing ability. Just a major source of potential scoring. But you do have a good running back in play. James Cook drawing plenty of carries, 17 carries a game over his first two. And again, the volume ticked up to 21 carries in the second game. Drew 3 targets in that game. Drew 1 target in that game. I was looking at the wrong column. So 22 potential touches there. The first game, 13 carries and 5 targets. 18 potential touches, but they were in the air a little bit more in that game. General expectation, though, again, I think it is a fairly high expectation. 18 and change potential touches. Sounds about right. And he's been a producer, 5.2 yards per attempt so far with 3.3 per attempt after contact. Scored 3 times on the ground already. The reasonable expectation of targeting puts him in play for receiving touchdowns as well. Short yardage opportunities through the air when they get in close. Plenty of correlated scoring between him and Josh Allen available. If I'm leaning toward Allen for the multiplier spot, you obviously want to pad some pass catchers into that. But maybe, especially because it's expensive with him being the second most expensive player on the team, maybe you get fewer people padding the Allen captain James Cook in a flex roll play. Just a little slight sliver of the difference. Again, I mentioned Shakir. I like a little bit better. They project essentially the same between him and Keon Coleman. If you want to call the too high thing a tiebreaker between that, that basically heads up projection. And I don't like to sink too much faith into that because 1, we're dealing with such small samples in the NFL anyway. 2, if we know all these things going in, well, those teams certainly know it. So they're going to try and change up that expectation. We see that constantly. So I don't try and overhype those things. But if you need a tiebreaker between the two, that would favor Shakir a little bit. First game, he drew 9 targets. He was involved, but not special in that game. 6 catches, 64 yards. Fair number of routes, drew a reasonable number of targets on those routes. 45 routes run over that stretch. Coleman was the better of the two in that one, though. He was targeted 11 times over 44 routes run, caught 8 of them for 112 yards and a touchdown. And then just, as Mike Tyson would say, faded into oblivion in the second game. Oblivion looked like 3 catches, 26 yards, caught all 3 of his targets. If you want to give him credit for that, only 19 routes run. But again, they were on the ground more in the second game, in the air more in the first game. So it probably comes down somewhere in the middle of those 2 games. Shakir was their better receiver throughout last year. He was also uninvolved last week, though. Just 1 catch for 12 yards on 2 targets over 17 routes run. So between the two, we do have a slight lean in targeting going in the direction of Keon Coleman over the first 2 games with 7 on the board per game versus the 5.5. But we'll see how that stretches out. You've also got Dalton Kincaid drawing a similar kind of target package. 5 on average. He was targeted 6 times last time out. Caught 4 of those for 37 yards. Scored a touchdown in the first game. Also had 4 catches in that one for 48. That was on 4 targets. He's the more highly targeted of their tight ends. But Dawson Knox is out there. And Knox actually picked up 5 targets last week, caught 2 of them for 19 yards. That was over 15 routes run. Week before that, caught 2 balls on 2 targets, 20 yards. That was over 22 routes run. He had a red zone target last week. He is an involved option in the red zone. When they get down toward scoring territory, they do call his number from time to time. He is the perfect kind of a wild card for showdown slates. So I love this option. Far more on the board for that random guy touchdown than like an Alec Ingold. That's obviously why you got to pay 6 times more for him. But Kincaid, if you're just looking for the stability at the tight end spot, Kincaid's your guy. Josh Palmer had a decent amount of involvement in the week 1 game script. Again, they were throwing the ball quite a bit more in that one. Caught 5 passes on 9 targets, ran 35 routes in that game. That dropped to 20 routes run in game 2. He caught 2 of 3 targets. Did go for 47 yards. Does draw a little bit of depth. Has the ability to stretch the field somewhat. So it's a nice third option to throw into the mix, or fourth option if you want to give Dalton Kincaid the credit there. But if we're talking about the sheer volume of it, then you're getting a ton of plays there, a 3-way split in targets there before we're getting down to Josh Palmer territory. And then Dawson Knox gets a little bit on the edges. Everybody else down depth chart is just a dart throw. Ray Davis did pick up 9 carries for 24 yards in their second game. But again, they were just kind of pounding the ball on the ground. They won that game by 20 points. Overall, Davis rushing for just 2.6 yards per rush attempt. Completely uninspiring numbers there. 1.2 before, 1.4 after contact. Down depth chart, you get Elijah Moore at what seems like kind of a high price. He was targeted once last time out for 31 yards. Carried the ball a couple times. Did score a touchdown on the ground, which, you throw that into the mix. That is another guy who potentially we're only looking at like 5 touches. But if one of them is a gadget play to put the ball in the end zone, then that plays a little bit. But the lack of actual involvement, the lack of actual expectation of touches. Again, we're talking about a guy who played 10 snaps with the offense in week 1, caught 1 of 1 targets and carried the ball once. And then in week 2, played 29 snaps with the offense, caught 1 of 1 target and carried the ball twice. Ran 16 routes, but it's not like they were looking for him a lot. So on the board is a dart throw, but limited. And I think I'd rather go there. I think there's a little bit more realistic opportunity to get him in the end zone. Did I skip Ty Johnson in here? There he is. Ty carried the ball just twice in each game. Had a better week 1. He ran for 24 yards on the 2 carries. Last time he was down to just 6 yards. Targeted twice in the first game, once in the second game. Yet to catch a pass this season. So again, limited options down there. But we've got tons of skill players to work with. We've got a couple capable kickers, at least 1 playable defense in this one. Tons and tons of stuff to take into the lineup building tab. It's also 7:06 already. Jesus. These shows fly by. How you guys doing out there? Beyond the rabbit hole saying they usually have close games. Yeah, I mean, you throw the division into the mix, that is a thing. Teams do play up a little bit with the direct opponent. But one of these teams obviously significantly better than the other one, favored by 11.5 points. Rabbit hole, what sounds better, HN and Kincaid or Tua and Coleman? I would say probably, depends on what we're really defining as better. Your lower owned combination is almost certainly going to be Tua and Coleman there, with a reasonable amount of, similar expectation for scoring and upside. So I'll go with that as my answer. In the raw scoring potential sense, it's the first one. So let's, just bear that in mind, that it does depend on exactly how you mean that question. I appreciate you, Greg. If you're still hanging out here through all that rambling that I was doing through the first players and looking at what was going on with that data feed, I appreciate you coming by. Greg's not playing tonight, but he came by just for solidarity, he says. We appreciate that. So let's see how we did with these with these slightly adjusted ownership projections and what impact that has on our ability to build some lineups here. I'm going to go with a Khalil Shakir, nice and cheap in the captain spot to begin. We'll see where we go. I do obviously want to give him Josh to work with there. We'll get into some Tua and 61 already. Keep that in mind. Prater's probably going to be pretty popular at that $5,000 price, but I do like that option. I do like that kicker, and I think he's going to have a nice day. Let's see what that looks like ownership-wise. And then 66 and change. We got to get somebody to catch the ball for Tua. I'd be tempted to go Waddle. He's active. We know he's active now, so we're all right there. You could get Patterson into this, but this is going to be stupid duped. 15 and change, and I'm more of a believer in that number now. Not a terrible starting point, but that's obviously more dupes than we're looking for. If we free this one up around like an Elijah Moore play, though, maybe that gets interesting. And again, we're stretching it out. That cuts us down pretty significantly. I just look for another guy right in that price range. You get Malik into that and pick up a second pass catcher there. 23. Ooh. Yeah, I don't like leaning in that Malik direction then. A little big playability, sure, but give me somebody that'll cut things down. So, I mean, oops. My inclination is always toward Dawson Knox in these situations. Even he is keeping us way up there at 18.5. But did you see the dip when we went with Elijah Moore? Again, wild card. But that's kind of what you're maybe looking for. Ooh, comes up just short of getting me from Waddle to Tyreek, too. There are 1,000 different. I get $900 there. This is kind of an interesting one, though. Again, there's no faith in Moore. But if we're just looking for those pure options that will probably get their hands on the ball a couple of times and maybe you get that gadget opportunity, there's a little potential there. And that would be a path toward a larger cash out, a larger jackpot. Let's see what we can do with taking that down a notch, though. What if we go, instead of committing to Tua in the passing game, HN in there, and then we're at 59 and change, so you can do like an HN but put the Bills in anyway, and then you're at 61, and then you're still leave money on the table is always a good path. And if we just did Prater's in there already, it's an interesting game too for the lack of the kind of go-to second running back here. Neither one of these teams really offering that up, right? Like usually that's a guy who fits into this equation really, really well. And we don't really have that option here. It's 61. Maybe this is an interesting one to put like Patterson into. No, it's not. Oof, 41. Wow, are the Bills that? No, you know what? That's the HN ownership that's impacting that much. How desperate do we have to get to bring this down? Knox was popular. I mean, if we just went with right back to that Moore option. I mean, this is the one that cut that one before down all the way to 5, and it's still leaving this one at 16. So this is just overbuilt. I think this stretch, all three of those are like mid-board. I mean, HN's obviously extremely popular, and then Prater and Bills are both popular. So those skewed us up the board too much. All right, so let's not have the kicker and the defense in there then, and we'll leave the star in there. Really not a great path to that, I don't think, unless you're getting really stretchy. Was with 31? I mean, you could if you just did something like that, or probably more likely that. You're obviously getting real thin on that Jalen Wright and pretty thin with touchdown dependency on Dawson Knox. Does cut us down nicely. You got money to play with there. You could kick right up to 39. You could get like Malik. You could get Eli Moore into that. So again, you go that direction, a little bit more owned. This direction, a lot more owned. Holy, that jumped to 20. What is Malik Washington's popularity? I got to see where they got him. Whew, yeah, that's pretty popular. He's up and out of the out of even the teens. And is a highly owned player. Getting some ownership around Ray Davis on that as well. Tanner Connor's picking up a fair amount. So I mean, if you're dipping down to that territory, you can obviously make plenty of things happen, but bear in mind, what the impact of his 20% ownership does versus like that Elijah Moore is at about a quarter of that, and takes you from that 20 to down to there. Obviously, a lower end option is going to see the ball less, but not crazy when we're cutting it by that much as far as what our actual win opportunity looks like. And then, yeah, Ray Davis was picking up a fair amount of ownership there. That puts us at 37 if we did it that way. So you could, again, go back to that Eli Moore, but like, things you don't want to do necessarily. Doubling up both these guys as your value plays since they're both getting popularity. Gonna leave you up in the 20s as far as dupes again. Gets a little bit limiting. Let's get a different captain in here. Move on from this build. Don't want to soak up all the time. What do you guys want to see? What's going on, Andy? Evening. BBL Slayer, we need some FanDuel. We're always here to talk FanDuel. No worries. We'll get there. That's FanDuel's where I play. Quality wants HM, Bills, Allen, Cook, Davis, Johnson. You can see what that looks like. I assume that's in order. Move it over so I can actually read it. Bills, Allen, Cook, Davis. And Ty Johnson. That's a lot of dupes. That's what, see, this is where, like, you just get cut down by how popular HN's going to be up there. Oh, wait, you know what? Hold on. That might come down. It's not, hang on. Don't react to that yet. Didn't change the defenses. Hate this. One day I'll actually build this look up into the damn thing. Ignore the numbers that you're not supposed to be seeing. Not my numbers anyway. There you go. That's better. 6.9. Yeah. I was going to say that. That was a big number for this lineup. You're all right there. With 800 to spend. I mean, you could go up to Malik, but you're probably adding to the ownership, not subtracting. Yeah, you add a little bit to the ownership if you swap out Ray Davis from Malik Washington. You might pick up a little bit of probability. So you've got what, 34 left? Yeah, this Dolphin D we don't really want. You go to the Jalen Wright option. With where's might be inclined to lean that way. Can you get there from here? 16. No, you can't there. You'd have to go that way. That cuts it even further down. Again, you're not sending many carries in the direction of the backup running backs, plural, there. And no guarantees that he touches the ball at all. But that's a way to bring it down with a reasonable, similar type option as the Ray Davis. That's an interesting one, though. As a HN build, that's definitely interesting. And no issues with playing him captain versus the Bills defense. I don't think that really matters. Not a bad lineup. What else we got? Do we want to see like a Prater captain? What does that look like? That could be weird. Go like Prater, both premium running backs, take this game in a totally unexpected direction. I still probably want Josh Allen in that, but maybe we don't see Allen passing as much. He runs one in. Cook carries the ball a little bit more, kind of like last week. The Bills don't really need to do that much. Only take out so much against the divisional opponent. 43. We're back down to this territory now. You could double up kicker in that direction then. And then 43, you're back on same guys. So let's actually go higher there. Kincaid. A little wipeout in that direction. That kind of jibes with our rushing, more conservative attack, I think, going tight end there. And then we're at 33, which puts like a Malik, somebody in that territory again, back into our lives. If it's Malik, we're 12 dupes. I don't love that. We're like Ray Davis. Still 10. Jalen Wright. Jalen Wright's the guy that really brings things down from there. It's him. Eli Moore's really low owned in that territory. Knox is probably closer to those guys than the other ones. 9.8. Slightly less than the first couple options. What did Nick Westbrook see last week? I think we breezed past him. Just 3 targets. He only ran 6 routes. It's kind of problematic. Washington just feels like the more dynamic between the two as well, given how they've used him so far. But maybe as just another guy to keep in mind as a dart, he is a guy who has been out there to run a few routes. He's a guy we've seen succeed in the league before. So just as another guy who's this one probably actually does help bring it down some. Yeah, 5. Right? For that kind of an impact, that's an okay guy to use. And then you could take it up the board there with that $1,300. Like that gets us to Shakir, if my math's right. We're still below 10. Have 100 on the board still. So you can't get to Coleman from that, but you can get to Shakir without pushing. You just push this back into the territory if you were using one of those guys in that previous version of it. It's not a bad alternative. If you wanted to go like Bills D, which is kind of on theme here, that keeps it pretty low. You get 900 back in your pocket, so you don't have to go in that Westbrook-Kikini direction, and then you can get 29. You go with the Jalen Wright option in that version, and you get it really, really low again, or you go with a guy that we know is more popular in Ray Davis, and you get the Ray Davis angle in under 10 dupes. So as you change around just like those last couple combinations that matter, I mean, they matter. Obviously, they're critical in getting the guy right who happens to be the one of the 5 or 6 options down through here that does connect. Getting that right is super important, but the variability and the flexibility back and forth is what we're really looking at switching up here, while just leaving this as, this is our anchor of what the lineup build is like and what we want to get our scoring from. Joker's here, probably telling me to move on from this lineup rather than expressing any enthusiasm about this lineup for the Joker translators out there, though. So we had a 8-chain build in here, courtesy of Quality Soul. BBL Slayer said second place on the last Bills primetime game, and then a 16-way split for first on the Packers last Thursday on a heater. Nice, dude. It's awesome. Love it. That was Kraft MVP. I hadn't really thought about Shavers much. He's in here. Got out there for 9 routes. Was targeted twice last time out. Did not catch either target. Played 25 snaps with the offense. Played more with special teams in the first week. More with the actual offense this past week. It would be just a dart throw. If anything, I mean, what's his 200? It's a reasonable idea as a dart. What kind of buzz is he picking up? Is he getting popularity? It's like 5-6% owned. Yeah, on DraftKings where it's that crazy cheap and it has that big of an impact, sure. When you get anybody who's realistically going to be out there for 10 plays at $200, yeah, that's fine. You can make things work. If you happen to fall into the end zone at that price, you're winning money. I mean, there's almost no doubt about it. It's difficult to screw that lineup up so bad from there, where you basically get a free spot. So yeah, in that regard, sure, I wouldn't expect much. He would be very, very low probability to do any kind of actual impactful scoring. But yeah, he's there because of the price. Is he more of a reasonable dart than like Alec Ingold? I don't think so. Ingold, arguably more involved. So limited guys down like that, but I think you knew that when you asked the question. I don't want to harp on it too much. Let's go to like a obvious build with like a Tyreek. Actually, no, let's flip that and go to a captain real quick. And then we'll switch them and see what it looks like. Still want Josh Allen if I can get him. His receivers aren't too expensive, so that's not a terrible idea, but maybe we go even cheaper. And instead of Shakir or Coleman, maybe we just go toward Kincaid there. And then like Prater and then give 2 to somebody else. Does that leave me Malik? It does. Not great, but a reasonable starting point. 11 and change. That's an okay build. And then if you wanted to, again, we've got like the options to do something like that takes essentially the exact same lineup and just chops that down. Because the difference between these two is not going to be all that great. You also gain some money back there. So you can go from Prater up the ladder. Again, we did this before. You get the Bills defense if you wanted it against the Tua play. That would be a weird build. Low dupes and, one of those ones where the math doesn't necessarily reflect people saying like, oh, no, not going to play that one. I don't want the Bills defense against my Tua captain. So I think that would be like a low-owned approach. I don't necessarily love it. If we didn't go with Allen, let's say we just went like with Cook. We'll leave Kincaid in there for the hell of it. We're taking by far the highest projected player out of the lineup here. In this case, since we're going with the Tua captain, we can give him another one of his strong options. Just double dip at the wide out spot then. Knocked us down a little further than I was thinking. Yeah, now we're in like D. Eskridge territory. That's where you get maybe like a Shavers in there, and then what can we do? 65. Oh, you can't get to Shakir in that. That sucks. Yeah, so even with that, you would have to get, what is he really buying me if I'm going that direction in this lineup? Not enough. The way to make that work would be right there. Right, you're going Waddle instead of Hill there, and now you get 75, and you pop one of the Bills receivers in, and that gets us at 4% because their ownership is in the low single digits on Shavers, but it's not nothing. Like I said before, it's 5-6, somewhere in that territory. You just have 900 to spend here. I don't know exactly where you'd want to go. Yes, I do. I would go, since I've got the Tua captaincy, I'll just take a little Dolphins wipeout up at the top there from my money. And then, I've got Waddle in here twice. Shit. My bad. 95. That's annoying. All right, so maybe he does buy me something. All right, so in that case, can I get back to Tyreek? Yeah, all right, that works better. Not having Waddle in here twice makes a big impact. Even if you want something popular like a Prater and just left a bunch of money on the table, you're cutting that way down. So like that is definitely getting a guy like Shavers in there. Again, you're just taking a spot because it's free and very, very low owned, and you're leaving a bunch of money on the table in this build, and you're not taking Josh Allen along for the ride, and we're not taking James Cook along for the ride. We're limited on that kind of a build, artificially, I think, driving that ownership down. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that would be a reasonably successful build. And then I wanted to flip just to see what our builds look like. Because with the quarterback, this stays really interesting with the quarterback coming in slightly cheaper than his top receiver and then the pass catching running back. That does, to me, make the argument for Tua in that captain spot. And then Tyreek, I think Waddle belongs up there too. But let's see. So if we go this route with the more expensive, that makes it even more difficult to get the Allen option in there. Oh, at 45. You go like Patterson and right back to Malik Washington again. I don't really want to do that. What about like Josh Palmer? Give Josh Allen an option, and we haven't really used Joshua Palmer yet. And then 43 and change. Patterson kind of jibes with that. You're back to 43 again. So then you just dip down to any one of these options we've talked about a few times. I'd be inclined to go like that, maybe. 10. It's pushed it too high. What can I get per spot? If you just went with like a... Yeah, those two guys are... Again, putting both those guys in really pushes that up. But if you just one of those guys, it's still popular. Again, once we get down to this point, we're just playing games with which one of those guys we want to put in here to drive this down the most. And we know that we reduced our probability of actually hitting that scoreboard as we go down. What we haven't talked about, we talked about it in the player breakdown, but we haven't put in here is the option at the tight end spot with the 2 weak tight ends on the Dolphins side. And between the two, again, just with the minor in the small sample of 2 games advantage in terms of who's been more involved in the passing attack, Tanner Conner maybe wins that battle slightly. $800, he wins the price battle. And again, I'm talking about neither guy was targeted last game. Connor was targeted 4 times in the first game. I think that's what I said, right? 4. Yeah, 4 times over 19 routes run in the first game. And then he went out and he ran 19 routes over 24 snaps in the second game. So when he's on the field, he's been running routes. They just didn't look in his direction. That's kind of the game we're playing with an $800 player, though. And that boosts us back up into this territory where we're at now 79. Maybe we take Palmer out of there and we're at 63. And you can go like, what do we have? Tyreek, Tua. Like double kicker from here might get interesting. Leave some money on the board. Yeah, still 10 though. Remember, some of this might be artificial from just me kicking those numbers up a little bit. But this was the point, trying to get these more, a little bit more challenged. Got plenty of money to spend on this one, obviously. So if we went Prater, we'd have 77. So you get to like Keon Coleman, somebody like that and we actually don't have somebody with Allen. That's way too owned though. What's the difference between Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman there? Woof. Back to that Bills D against a Dolphins captain idea. Even that is a really highly owned combination. I'm surprised. What's Tanner Connor at? That would do it. Tanner Connor is equally owned to Ray Davis, Malik Washington, Josh Palmer's slightly higher. So Tanner Connor's right in that same group. I didn't realize. I figured he'd be a little bit lower, but I guess the $800 explains that away. So we don't have the advantage, the potential. He's just as big a wild card as I thought he was, but people are actually going there. So meh, kind of knocks that off the board. Is there a way to make this interesting though? I mean, what's Julian Hill's ownership? Yeah, all right. So that would be the path toward that then. Even though we've identified that Tanner Connor at the cheaper price is the more likely of those two guys, that's what everybody's doing. So for our showdown build here, what we would do in that situation then is exactly that. And now we've got 63, so we're back up toward this kind of territory. Just take our shot with Matty Prater there, and we're down at very few dupes. We're leaving a little money on the table there. You could obviously swap out, the Bills D, so that we're not using that. I do like the idea of a Bills defense and Matt Prater and Josh Allen uncorrelated going up against a Hill Tua captaincy. But you could obviously go in a different direction, like giving Josh Allen potentially his top receiver to work with. And now we're pushed up to 8 and change dupes. But that's still, again, we're cutting down pretty significantly from those lineups that are going to be duped 150 times. And that's our goal. That's what we're shooting for. So that is a more probably reasonable way to look through that tight end spot, considering what assuming they're right, obviously, what that ownership on that Connor spot looks like. And since somebody was calling for it, let me jump over to FanDuel real quick. Just chewing up time. Come on. Too many things in here already, and I've only got the one game in for the week so far. It's going to be a long 48 hours over the next 2 days. Davis has one target in the 2 games. He's carried the ball 10 times, 9 times last time. But again, they were running the ball more last time out, threw the ball a lot more in that first game against the Ravens. They just basically smoked the Jets last time. And then Johnson carried the ball just twice in each game, was targeted twice in the first game, once in the second game. So the volume is very, very minimal for both of those backs. But yeah, to your point, Johnson runs more routes, would draw a slightly more targeting expectation under normal circumstances for the discussion that was going on in the chat. All right, let's throw a couple FanDuel ones up on the board. I like my Khalil Shakir in the MVP spot there. A little Josh Allen. Let's get too into that one. We'll just start with a straightforward approach. Let's see where we go. All right, 72 apiece because FanDuel's friendly. We have downboard first. Let me. And this is we're already at 5. So you can essentially do whatever you want. With 12-1 to spend, you only can't have A-Chain and you can't double play Josh Allen, but you can take James Cook. And even with him being popular, that doesn't even matter. That's a good first build. I'll take that. Nobody play that. I like that lineup. I'm going to throw that in. If we go a different route, what about people who want to like load up on that Bills front end? Whoops. Doesn't matter. We go that way. And just firepower in this one. See, I mean, the fact that you can do this on FanDuel with those 4 guys to start and still have 6,000 to spend here, it's like, it's just so, it's not as challenging as DraftKings is as far as the quality of which of these guys you pick. Obviously, we meet the other side of that once the lower on the board guys do connect and we don't have them because of that ability to put these other guys in. But it's just so friendly on that FanDuel board. Let's see, 54 for Palmer, so we actually can't get him into that one at for where we have 51. But you can get any of the Westbrook, Johnson, Moore, I like Gordon if you're interested in that direction. Malik Washington's only 28 on FanDuel. We were using him a bunch at 32 on DraftKings. You pop him in there. This will probably be duped a couple times, but not many. That's leaving a little bit on the table. If we just went back to the Dawson Knox option there, which I was not necessarily looking to do since we've got 2 pass catchers in there with Josh Allen already, you're getting it way, way down and leaving money on the table. That's a realistic approach. If you went like this and went with Kincaid instead of Coleman in the second top-end pass catcher role, you're back to 65 in this leftover spot. And now you can go, the second kicker in this lineup, and you're only sub 1. That's not realistically sub 1, I don't think. I think that lineup's probably duped 5 times, somewhere in there. You can only do so much to tweak these numbers. Let's get a more popular guy into that MVP role, though. That's where we're gaining so much ground. I think this will be a way that a lot of people go to start. Kind of borrowing what we talked about with that other one. Let's go Kincaid, cheapen it up a little bit. We go Bills D against the HN captain, and then 73. You can throw Prater into this, and double kicker defense against your captain, and Josh Allen with his tight end. Not completely crazy. There are things in here I don't necessarily love, but that is a kind of a lineup that wins showdown slates. Obviously, that would be the first thing I would probably change. And you've got a few options to work with. You go down the board and leave money on the table with many of these options down here, obviously. Got the other kicker in there. Palmer's probably the guy. Right? You leave a little money on the table. You've got Josh Palmer in there. He's making the connection in with Josh Allen. You're fading the top 2 pass catchers in that offense, but still buying a little bit of quality there. I think that's a reasonable approach to getting the ownership down on a lineup that does still include these 2 guys up at the top. You've got money to work with there, though. So, like, if you took Kincaid out of it, you're at 89. So that does get us to Waddle, if you wanted to go that route. And then you're just fading the Tua part of that equation. You've doubled or tripled the ownership, the expectation of dupes, but that's still a fairly low dupe lineup for one that's got Achane in the captain. Again, this probably gets impacted a little bit more than that now that we're up to this combination where, like, both kickers will be in lineups. Josh Palmer's obviously going to be in people's lineups, and then these 3. So maybe it's not quite as low duped as that would suggest, but it's probably, one of the lower approaches toward a Achane captaincy. And then we get the big the big McGillicuddy here. Josh Allen just absurdly owned in the captain spot. But again, deserving of every piece of that. It's just that that's not necessarily our approach. I'll go Shakir there. Give him my favorite one of their pass catchers. And then let's see what we can do with a Palmer in there. 81 seems silly. I kind of would be inclined to play Prater in that. And then we'll see if we can get 2 Dolphins. Obviously, Waddle's right there. And then you've got plenty of money to spend. You could go Waddle and Patterson easily enough. 4 and change for an Allen captain. Not the worst starting point. Now we're into it. 5,000 a spot left, huh? Patterson to go with my HN play there, and it doesn't really hurt my Bills play. And then you get to one of the cheapos. And we're probably, since we're using Josh Allen up there anyway, and we don't have Kincaid in there, that's where our guy Dawson Knox kind of slides in. And we push Patterson back out of that 77. You could flip kickers and go to Prater. You're probably picking up a little ownership there. Not much. Not overly impactful if you made that change. It's a reasonable approach. If you wanted to get the Bills defense out of there, maybe we'll leave Prater, keep the Bills D out of it. Now we're at 81. So you go Coleman into this thing too, and now you're just total wipeout. But that pushes our dupes up at 9. I think that simultaneously pushes our lineup dupes up. That nearly, what did that do? Well, not from here, but we were down in the 2s and 3s prior to that. But it not only pushes our dupes up significantly, I think it knocks our probability down. Our probability that all of this is going to pay off. Yes, Josh Allen being in the captain role feeds that idea. But to me, my money, we're getting some direction towards some of these other guys. Joshua Palmer's likely to get into that equation and screw up your day if you're putting that much weight into the most obvious guys. So you're taking a little probability dip and you're duping it up and you're getting less of a payout if it does connect. Not the best approach. 7:45. Slate is going to be starting shortly. I do want to build 1-2 a captain lineup here, and then we'll punch out for the evening. So we want to go that route. And then let's go. Actually, let's get this shootout going. Let's see if we can do it. We'll go Allen, and then we'll go downboard. Whoops. There, and then we're at 66. We got Patterson into that. 7,000. Patterson Prater double kicker pays off everything. 3 dupes still, but not completely crazy. You just need this connection, so you're fading the top 3 pass catchers there. Still buying a little connection with an upside guy. Obvious as far as where that connection comes from, and then both kickers paying out is not completely nuts for this type of a slate. That's actually a reasonable lineup. I don't hate that build for a Tua captaincy. Again, and I think Tua works well in the multiplier spot because of how he's impacted by the salary less than your top 3 guys. His top 2 skill players are more expensive than he is. That's something we can take advantage of with the way the showdown slates work. So something to consider there. If you want to go a different way, what can we do to shake it up a little bit from here, though? Can we get a Shakir in there? This will push our expense a little bit, but yeah, even this still works. I probably wouldn't go that route. That is where we use like a Malik for super cheap. And then 68, you get back over here to Kincaid. That isn't bad. You really just need that one dart to Malik to kind of pay that lineup off. There's another one that comes up. It's probably going to be duped more than the just under 3 times that it would indicate there via the math and my tweaks. But that's an interesting build, interesting approach. And then, yeah, obviously I'm not going to bother spending the time, but obviously you can work any one of these guys in. But actually, that's a way to illustrate the point, I think. If we were to just do this. No, okay, they're on similarly. I was expecting Knox was maybe a little bit more highly on there, but it doesn't seem like he is. So there are ways, again, especially with Tua in that MVP spot, as less owned and less expensive than some of the competition up in the most highly projected guys, the most likely scorers, and a guy who's going to be touching the ball every single play. Those are the guys you want to pay attention to. And when they come up a little bit lighter than maybe they ought to be, both in price and popularity in that role, that's when we can kind of pull the trigger there rather than going to it by default just all the time when it's the most popular decision people are making there. People are going to Allen in that role a ton. But anyway, 748. I think enough said. A bunch of people bailed after we stopped talking DraftKings. Let me get out of here. I got a couple lineups to finish off. Really appreciate all you guys. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Come on back. We'll be talking main slate probably again Saturday again this week. Keep an eye out for the scheduling. Baseball slate tomorrow. Main slate projections, initial rankings for each position are up on the website right now. So you can check those out. Under $1 a day to access all of it. Everybody in the sound of my voice probably already knows that. But rotoscouts.com, give it a look. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Share those results when you do at RotoScouts on Twitter or in the premium Discord, which is linked for free down in the description of this video. No subscription to the website or anything like that necessary. Just hop into the Discord, join the community, come hang out. With that, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Later.